So I'm going to stand up here. Wow, I got music too. You know, Tenbound does not mess around. Listen, I'm really excited to be here. You know, I'm really passionate about the work that's being done here at the conference and what we all do when we go back home and to work. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about a unification story of like what we did with Tenbound and also just my view on this space. Again, I'm at Iterable now, an amazing company, a marketing automation platform that provides a customer engagement for companies like Zillow and Major League Baseball and some of the largest brands, DoorDash, out there. And it's so important that we have a foundational go-to-market plan that is rooted in sales and lead development. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I start a lot of my presentations or when I talk in my meetings with like, glad to be here. I am really glad to be here. And it's a moment in time of like, to have presence of focusing on, I'm glad to be alive. I'm glad to be here with you. But I learned this phraseology, and some of you might have as well, from some of the thought process around the Blue Angels. Who here has seen this amazing, pretty much everyone in San Francisco in October. But like, I mean, it's pretty amazing. They're going hundreds and hundreds of miles an hour, and like they are this far apart from each other, one arm's length apart. And afterwards, after they do these amazing shows, they all get together in a circle and they talk, you know, they're usually at a table, and they do a complete retro of the entire show. And you can see some of the older ones where they walk through it. They walk through turn by turn, and they start before they give their own feedback. They say, "I'm glad to be here." Now, clearly, they are really glad to be alive. But like, you know, they're also welcoming feedback and welcoming growth. And like, it really inspired me to hear that, because like, we all here are on different paths of growth. Like, you know, you might have hopefully you have a chart like this somewhere in your deck about in terms of revenue growth and how you're doing, and like whether you're a startup and have no revenue, you're on the path to going public, or you're going major scale. Everyone is looking at growth actually very similarly, and you're on a path of trying to figure out how to get customers to enjoy your product and to buy your product and to renew your product and to keep on amplifying their happiness. And this path seems so straightforward, and like when you sort of look at how success happens, you might have seen this, you think it's like, oh yeah, this is how it is when you're looking at memories, but we all know that it's more like this. And it's really, really important to embrace this, embrace the messiness of it, embrace like the mistakes you make, and that's really important when you start thinking about these things. A little bit about my background. I went from before Iterable, I was at Cisco, where I was chief marketing officer of the security practice, a $2 billion business, trying to grow double digits. And before that, I was at OpenDNS, trying to create a new marketplace and create a new segment of the security world. And so clearly, the journeys are like this, And when I think about talking to different groups that either I work with or work for me or I work for, I think about like, what are the foundations of go-to-market scale? And I think it's important, even in the sales and lead development, you start thinking about it holistically. You start thinking about bringing the right products to market and services to market. Really important. And lead development, sales development being at the front of that, you have such access to giving feedback all the way through to engineering. Making sure you acquire the right customers. And notice I didn't say, make sure we get the right leads and the right appointments. That all is to make sure we get the right customers for happiness, and that's on all of us. The partnership side is something else that we all have responsibility for to make go-to-market successful. Whether that's technology partners with some of the great vendors that are out there right now, in terms of how that works and make sure you can engage that the right way, or partnerships in terms of go-to-market partnerships. And finally, it's all about repeatability, when it comes to, go-to-market motion. And like, I think that's a big theme you're seeing here today. And the last two, measuring and harmony, I focus on the harmony part, because like you can measure, and if it becomes punitive, if it becomes like a report card, which I'm sure everyone has been in that room, that really sucks. And it shouldn't be. There should be a ability to be vulnerable, ability to fail, ability to try things new. And the way to do that is while you're measuring, you're doing it in harmony. And the last thing is, it is incumbent upon everyone who is touching customers or thinking about customers or the whole company to try to ensure customer happiness. Customer success is not a goal only of a customer success department. It is incumbent upon everyone to focus on this. And these are, like I found across my career, focusing on these things front of mind, will build a foundation for success. And so when I think about, some people, when I've talked to them about this kind of foundation, they're like, I'm in sales development, I'm lead development, and like, how does that play? And part of it is the way I look at, this such an important function, that it's not just, sales development, there's BDRs, ADRs, there's the acronym SOUP. I really look at it as revenue development. And when you start thinking about that, it really starts thinking about every part of the process. And the question is like, what can you do? It's sort of like, and this is just one example that I've used in terms of the customer journey, right? That, it's clearly we're very much focused on, where we as in sales development focus on is more at the top. But if you focus on the customer journey the whole way through, you're going to be able to service your customers better, your prospects better, and it's really important to understand it. In every customer journey is different for whatever product, but there's something that's very similar in all. There are moments that matter in every customer journey, and it's not the moments that you want it to matter as a technology or a vendor or whatever you're selling. You have to understand those moments and figure out how you can show up in those moments with the right call, the right content, the right email, whatever it is. If you focus on that and maximize your own differentiator, that's where you're going to win. And so, and it's even becoming more important. I mean, this stat is crazy to me. Like that, Walker says that in 2020, that next year, customer experience is predicted to overtake price as a product. Overtake price and product as a main differentiator. Think about that for a second. The experience a customer has buying, using, so this applies to usability as well, is going to be the most important thing. And so, and I'm looking at some of my Iterable folks here, and Jamie talks about this, who runs our SDR function. Like the idea is like making a customer happy, focusing on all the way through. That's going to make them want to buy, but it's also going to make them want to come back. If they, for some reason, it's not right, the experience that you provide will be memorable and will be a strong, strong push for them to come back. So when you start thinking about how you do that as part of a larger organization, I'm pretty passionate about this as well. And it goes back to a lot of the themes I have are not departmental. And when you think about where, SDRs, or again, pick your acronym of choice here, the more siloed this department is, in my experience, the harder it is, the more friction, the more headwind there is for success. It is so important, and I really feel this way, that the go-to-market function, especially on revenue creation, is making sure that these three departments, while they all have their own KPIs, their own obviously organizational charter, they're working in harmony. You get more bang for your buck. Any way you want to look at it, making sure that everyone knows what they're doing, why they're doing it, and focus on the same high-level goals, which in most cases the most leading indicator is activity and then pipeline. And then if you do that, you're going to get happy customers and money, right? This is where the dollars come. So it's really important. And when I start talking about the success story that we had with Tenbound, it's really around this sort of image. So I do want to get to that now. I've been at Iterable for almost a year, in a few months. And when I first came in, we have amazing culture, amazing people. We wanted to really hone in on the lead development, the SDR function. And so we brought in Tenbound, which has been a great experience. And before I actually go through the case study, I want to give a shout out to some of our SDRs that are here. There we go. Shameless plug. It's a great place to work. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to do that. But it is important that when you talk about process, when you talk about building and building SLAs, doing all these things. It all comes down to the people. And I'm humbled and blessed to work with amazing people. And so I just wanted to give them a thank you and a shout out. So let's go into the sort of the state of affairs at the beginning. And again, there's a lot of beginnings. So I'm just picking this particular beginning, because again, when you look at that scale of growth, there's always moments in time where you start looking. The first time we had an SDR, that was a beginning. But when we brought on Tenbound, this was the state, And it goes back to not the concentric circles working together. Amazing functions, amazing marketing, amazing sales development, amazing all these as individuals, but they're more siloed. And not because of politics or anything malicious, which again, if that's the case, you should really think about where you're working, honestly. But most of the time, people are siloed because they're working really hard, right? There's no you'll hear in this talk, there shouldn't be any culpability being assigned. But these organizations were siloed. Also, there was undefined operations, or at least sometimes different operational workflows, especially on the inbound process. And that's what we're going to somewhat focus on here. And again, this goes into the factor of being siloed, because the way lead development and SDRs work best is when you really look across at least the prospect journey, never mind the customer journey. And finally, we had amazing tools, and systems, but they weren't optimized. They weren't optimized to a process. They weren't optimized to people. And so this is sort of like the state, a high-level state of what we wanted to start chipping away at. And again, it's a journey. And so the first thing we did was we started plotting the course of action, what we were going to look at. And you started with, and Tenbound came in and really helped us here. But helped us, as a partnership, which is something I really appreciate about working with this organization. You start putting together a visual map. I mean, it's a process flow, workflow, but it's really important to start seeing what is the existing state. Put it out there. Make it not about people, not about even outcomes. What actually is happening. I don't know, and you could do this in most of the work product you do, but when you start mapping out what you do, you're going to have an agnostic way of looking at it without judgment. And that's a really important part of this process. Then, by definition, you can start looking at the gaps, and start seeing where are the breakdowns. And then you start creating new workflows about how you want to optimize it. And then you start thinking about putting water through the pipes and start seeing where there's leaks. And this is sort of this very systematic approach that we took. And clearly it goes down to goal setting. And I'll get to goals in a while. We have long-term goals and we have short-term goals, but really being specific that all the functions are focused on the right expectations. I mean, if I can give one public service announcement, it's managing expectations is so important. And managing expectations does not mean telling everyone else what they should expect. But it's a matter of making sure you're aligned on those expectations, because that's what's going to define success. Because I'll tell you one of the worst things, and I'm sure you can empathize with this, is you think you did awesome, and you were in your own sort of world, and you think you did awesome. You start talking about it, and somebody else expected you just do better, right? They had nothing to do with it, and that feeling, especially if you're a manager and you're managing people, that is the worst feeling that someone on your team can have. So the idea of making sure everyone is aligned on goals is extremely important. So then, where do we focus? Now it's a focus. We didn't want to boil the ocean, so we focused on a specific conversion points. And we picked speed to lead, MQL to SQL conversion, and the size of the deals. These are the most pressing issues on the inbound flow. And then we focused on execution, right? And when you think about what does that mean, how do you try to improve these things? Again, you can have the best of dashboards, but that if you're not actually putting the work in and continuing to work on it and to affect it, it's not going to happen. Again, when you go into your weekly meeting and you're not changing anything, you're not going to get you're not going to get different results. That's a really obvious statement, but you'd be surprised in how many times week after week you go into the same thing and nothing's changing. So these are the things that we did. First and foremost, we brought in players from all of the different departments that impact this such important top of the funnel flow. Outlined their responsibilities, did the RACI charts, figuring out who is responsible for what, who needs to be consulted, et cetera. And then we started working on SLAs. And again, there's a really important 2 words there, mutually agreed upon, right? Like, it's got to make sure that the SLA you put out is the SLA that's going to make someone successful or debate about it. And we worked on that and document that. And then we rolled out training, coaching, and sales playbooks for new reps to make sure that they're aligned with this new order. And finally, start thinking about how we're going to report and the standards that we're going to do that. Again, both at the rep level, the manager level, all the way up to the board. Because we do talk about, lead development at the board. And there, I don't know how many of you actually talk to your CEOs, if you're not a CEO yourself, about it, but like, this is something that is becoming boardroom worthy continuously every quarter. So thinking about how that's going to roll up is important. So, and then it's important, again, when you start putting that into action, you start thinking about those reasonable goals in short sprint periods. So, there's a lot of ways to describe this. So I'm going to do it with like 2 mountains. So you got Mount Everest, the largest mountain peak in the world. We should be aspiring to get up there, right? Like, anyone who's a climber, said, I want to do that. I want to be there. I want to acclimate at 17,000 feet. I want to go there. I've read the books. I want to do that. And you should. Those should be your goals. But if you go in saying, I want to do that in day 1, and you try to go up there without having the experience or even the muscle memory to do it, you're not going to succeed. So you got to start thinking about the sprints. So how many people here have heard of Mount Shasta? Right. So 14,000 feet roughly, second largest mountain in California. Of course, I've climbed it myself. I know you're thinking that. That was a joke. Come on. Anyway, tough crowd here. But the idea is, like, this is a mountain that you can do. You can do in a day and a half. It requires some technical ability, but not a lot. Again, I did it. And the idea of when setting goals, you want to think about what you can accomplish in a short period of time. You can drive up to Reading and do it, like in a day and a half, right? Everest, not so much. And so you got to start thinking about this in terms of your own work. What is something that you can measure in a period of about 90 days from that sprint? So I'll give you an example of what we did. We had a number of these goals. And one of the ones we did was demo requests, which, in my view, when someone requests a demo, they are raising their hand saying, I am really, really interested in your product, right? Like, that's a pretty strong indicator. So we wanted to make sure the speed to lead, the idea that the speed in which we actually talk to them, the time it takes to actually talk to that person. And industry standards varies depending on processes and what you're doing, but we were when we measured, again in the assessment, okay, there we go. We were 1 hour and 24 minutes. 1 hour and 24 minutes from the time the lead came in there. And again, a lot of them are somewhat self-service. They'll figure it out. They're waiting for an email. They want to do that. But like, our goal and the first thing was not to get it to 2 minutes. It was to get it to less than 30. But I'll say after 90 days, I'm implementing these things, we saw significant increases. We far exceeded the 30. Obviously, it depends. Sometimes it was 2. On the weekends, it was longer. But the average we got was well within that. The next thing we wanted to focus on was the MQL, SQL conversion rate, right? Because that is definitely something that from a demo, like, not only the speed to which we're engaging the prospect, but like, how good is that, manual nurturing, which was, what we were doing. And we had a conversion rate of 31%. We wanted to increase that to 40%. And again, we far surpassed that. And that was partly working with marketing and making sure we were getting them with the right kind of information as well. It wasn't just on the lead development rep themselves. And finally, one is about increasing deal size, the average deal size of an opportunity. Now, this is a little harder, right? I mean, like, it's like, and this is where we wanted to increase it by 20%, but again, this is where it really takes the whole company. And this one, we're on our way. We have not necessarily, far exceeded that. Sometimes we're getting it depending on the swim lane itself, but like, this takes more time because you got to figure out, maybe you're focused on the wrong customers. How do you start doing that? How do you start bringing people in that are going to have a higher deal size? But, it's one thing that all the groups are working together. So really exciting. And again, working with Tenbound across this whole process to make sure we're being efficient and focused and having a third party in there to make sure that we were in line and not, chasing every squirrel that we saw. So this general takeaways, like, on this process was that, like, and things that we had to course correct ourselves, is like making sure that you track everything. And especially on the sausage making of doing this. it's really important. This idea, these next two, continuous execution, communication, and the idea that, the ideas can be easy, but actually implementing project management, they all sort of lend itself to alignment is not a moment in time thing. It's something that takes a lot of work and a lot of focus. And we learn that. Sometimes we stop focusing on it for a bit, and we got to be pulled back. So these are just sort of like, again, public service announcements of how we did it, and so hopefully you can do it and help yourself. So, I'm all about problem solving, and as Chief Operating Officer, there's multiple functions that report up to me, and there's people on the technical side, and not. My belief is that innovation happens in every department, and I think on an sales development, revenue development, whatever you're going to call it, we're trying to solve some of the most complex problems. And I'm not exaggerating there. In terms of growth, it starts here, and it's really important that we keep on innovating. We keep on trying to solve these problems creatively, and that is as innovation. And my final thing on a personal side, and this is, I talk to my team a lot about this as well, is the way you're gonna do that, and it's hard sometimes. I know when you're sitting in between very strong sales leaders and marketing leaders and executives, to get out of your comfort zone is hard. But it's something that when you do, it's you'll see growth. And I've seen it, I push myself continuously to do that, and the people around me. So if I could say this is such an important body of work that we're doing here, and what you all are doing is so important. So I just want to urge you to keep on doing it, and keep on coming back to organizations like this, because the collective mindset of growth is here, and it's really inspiring. So thank you very much, and that's me. I think I have time for questions. I think. I see someone raising their hand.
I'm just curious, can you offer more specifics about how you improve the MQL to SQO conversion, some of the tactics that you that you did internally to focus on that?
Sure. So the question is, again, the MQL, every point of the funnel, there's a set of actions that you have there. So when you think about it, when you have an MQL coming in, what are you going to do to get them to be and we have a stage 2, stage 3 opportunity, however you want it. So it's a combination of really focused scripting, focused on the use case. I'm all about it. It comes back to that foundational block of getting the right customers here. It's if the reps who are answering the phone understand the use cases and putting them in their own right swim lanes of content, you're going to get better results. And again, sometimes it's going to be more quickly saying, sorry, this is not right for you. But I would say the biggest thing is more customized scripting, and making sure that again, prospect use case content that you have is as quickly available as possible. So, good question.
I think we got time for
any other
one more, maybe.
I could tell you about my hike up Mount Shasta. All right, I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time.